What if the mark of the beast was already among us, and you hadn't noticed? Most people imagine that the prophecies of Revelation are still far off, something for the future, for the last days. But what if I told you that? Have the final days already begun? That Revelation 13 is already being fulfilled before our very eyes. In the technologies we use, in the systems we obey, in the laws we accept, what about the silent decisions we make every day without realizing it? Revelation 13 speaks of a beast that dominates the world, imposes a mandatory market, controls commerce, religion, and even people's thoughts. Many read this text as an allegory. But what happens? When does the allegory begin to become reality? We are living in a time where prophetic signs are manifesting with frightening clarity. The accelerated advancement of artificial intelligence, digital financial control, the imposition of global systems that no longer respect spiritual freedom. And at the center of this transformation, there is a people who have always been targeted, always persecuted, always silenced: the black people. Revelation 13 is not a distant prophecy. It is being fulfilled now. Watch the news. Observe the laws. Understand the algorithms. The world is being prepared for something that goes beyond what the natural eye can see. But the question that needs to resonate at this moment is, and what about the black population? Are they spiritually prepared for what is to come? While many are distracted, entertained, complacent, the spiritual structures that uphold the truth are under attack. And within this invisible war, there is a group that carries an ancestral spiritual heritage: the descendants of Africa, the people of the diaspora, the forgotten children of a hidden biblical legacy. Have you ever stopped to think that the historical persecution against black people is not just social, but spiritual? Could there be a deeper reason behind so much suffering, exclusion, and manipulation? Could it be the mark of the beast is being implemented, not with visible chips, but with ideologies, habits, and structures that, do they stifle the spiritual identity of an entire people? The time of ignorance is over. The call is urgent. It's time to look at the apocalypse with different eyes. It's time to see that the signs of the end times are not just in the pages of the Bible, but in the streets, in schools, on screens, and in the decisions you make every day. And in this video, you'll discover what almost no one dares to say: the true meaning of Revelation 13, how the beast acts silently in the modern world, and why black people need to take a stand now, before it's too late. This video is not for the complacent. It is not for the indifferent. Who is it for? Feels that something is wrong in the spiritual world, for whom he realizes that a battle is being fought in silence. It's for those who understand that black people were not forgotten by God, but called to something greater in this prophetic time. So get ready for revelations that will shake your certainties. What you are about to see may change the way you see the Bible, the world, and especially his prophetic role in this generation. Because when everything seems normal, remember, deception is the beast's most powerful weapon, and many are already being marked without knowing it. Therefore, before we proceed, I want to ask you something simple, but extremely important. Pause for a second now. If this topic has touched a nerve within you, leave a comment below saying, "I am attentive, I am awake." This is not just any comment. It's a public statement. It's a sign that you refuse to be just another face in the sleeping crowd. Furthermore, if this content is making you think, don't forget to leave a like. This helps the video reach more people who, like you, also need to wake up to what's happening. And if you still not subscribed to the channel, click the subscribe button now and activate the notification bell. Here, we will reveal the mysteries that have been hidden for centuries, primarily concerning the spirituality of black people and the signs of the end times. Each video is a key. Each revelation is a step towards your awakening. Don't miss out. Let's go all the way together, because what comes next, it will show you that nothing is a coincidence. Now we can understand. How did this entire prophecy begin to come true? To understand what is truly happening before our eyes, we need to return to the pages of Revelation and understand what is written there with spiritual clarity. Chapter 13 of the book of Revelation is not merely a collection of symbolic visions. It is a direct warning for the days we are living in. It is not a vague prediction of the future. It is a detailed prophetic map that is being fulfilled literally, technologically, and spiritually behind the scenes of the modern world. The text presents us with two beasts: The first rises from the sea, the second from the earth. And these are not monstrous figures meant merely to frighten us. They are spiritual representations of global systems that work together to control humanity. The first beast represents a world empire, a system of government that receives authority directly from the dragon, who in Revelation is Satan himself. This empire does not act with visible swords or crowns, but with control, manipulation, idolatry, and persecution. It is a power that shields the truth, distorts justice, and imposes laws in the name of peace, but which, behind the appearance, carries the corruption of deceit. The second beast, in turn, appears harmless. It has two horns like a lamb, an appearance of innocence, spirituality, and faith, but speaks like a dragon. It represents corrupt religious power allied with the global political system. Together, these two beasts work in perfect harmony to establish what the Bible calls the image of the beast. And here begins one of the most dangerous points: the creation of false worship, of false spirituality that will appear pious, that will use biblical language, that will quote verses, but which, in practice, is totally disconnected from the true God. And now think about this. How many times throughout history have black people been forced to accept a distorted faith? How many times have attempts been made to erase our original connection with the Creator, with the truth? How many times have we been given an adulterated Bible, an imposed religion, an image of Christ that did not represent us? This is not a coincidence. It is part of the strategy of this beast that rises from the earth and manipulates the masses, disguised as religion, but fueled by lies. And look, chapter 13 goes on to say that this system will create a must-have brand, a mark that will be placed on the right hand or on the forehead. And without this mark, no one will be able to buy or sell. In other words, the prophecy is warning us that a time will come when participation in the economic system will be conditional upon spiritual submission. And when we look at the world today, this is already being prepared. Cards, chips, digital identities, social credit systems, everything is being directed towards a single point: total control. But make no mistake, this brand is not just a physical object. It is also a sign of spiritual loyalty, a mark that distinguishes those who follow the system of the beasts from those who remained faithful to the eternal. And the most urgent question is, how many of us have already accepted this label without realizing it? How many of us are so integrated into the world system, so accustomed to the artificial lifestyle it offers, that we have lost our spiritual identity? The false prophet, represented by the second beast, has the power to perform signs, miracles, and even make fire descend from heaven. This means there will be a religious manifestation that will be convincing, that will enchant the multitudes, but that does not come from God. It will be a false faith, an illusory revival. And once again, we see how this is already happening in our time. How many churches have bowed to the system, preached prosperity without holiness, promised blessings without repentance, and completely forgotten the prophecies? And the black people, once again, are at the center of this battle. Because we carry a strong, ancient, prophetic spiritual root. Because our identity, long erased, still bears the marks of a forgotten alliance. Because the enemy knows that when the black people awaken spiritually, his plan is starting to fall apart. Observe how algorithms control you, how culture pushes you toward consumption, immediate pleasure, and individualism. How values that were once sacred are now ridiculed. How biblical truth has been diluted, relativized, and censored. All of this is part of the fulfillment of Revelation 13, and many don't realize it because they are too busy chasing after things that don't nourish the spirit. The beast's system will not come with signs. It will not use obvious names. It will present itself as progress, as inclusion, as freedom. But behind it, there will be spiritual slavery. The real battle is being fought right now, not with visible weapons, but with information, with mind control, with subtly distorted doctrines. And that is why we need to speak openly, courageously, about what is happening. You need to understand, the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet are not figures from a distant future. They are acting now, in the real world. They are in governments, in control systems, in the platforms we use, in the laws being passed, in religions that have been corrupted. And if you are still waiting for a spectacular supernatural sign to wake up, it may already be too late. The apocalypse is happening in the routine, in the detail, in the omission, in the conformism. And God's call to his people, especially to us, the children of the diaspora, is a call to prophetic awakening, a call to break free from the structures that have been imposed upon us, to restore our spiritual identity and understand that we weren't put into this world by chance. We are part of something bigger. And when you understand that, the apocalypse ceases to be a scary book and becomes a manual for resistance. This resistance begins when you choose not to bend to the system, when you refuse to accept the normalization of sin, when you stop following human voices and return to listening to the voice of the Spirit, when you decide to separate yourself, sanctify yourself, and prepare yourself, because the mark is already among us, and only those who stand firm in faith will be able to resist. Perhaps you're wondering now, but how do I identify these manifestations of the beast in my daily life? How do I recognize if I'm already trapped within this system without realizing it? These are important questions, and we'll continue discussing this in more depth in the next part of this video. But before we continue, tell me in the comments, have you noticed clear signs of Revelation 13 happening in the real world? Write this down. I see the signs. If you are seeing all of this with spiritual clarity, or else, I am waking up. If this video is opening your eyes right now, your comment can inspire others to wake up too. And remember, the next segment will show you what most people still don't understand about how the beast's system works in our time. Don't stop here. Now that we have managed to open our spiritual eyes to recognize the prophetic elements revealed in Revelation 13, we need to delve deeper into this abyss of control that is being silently dug before humanity. And the question that begs to be asked, but which many still avoid answering, is simple. Is the beast system already active? The answer is direct, uncomfortable, but necessary. Yes, it is operating at an accelerated pace, disguised as modernity, advancement, progress, and worse, disproportionately affecting those who have already been historically marginalized, the black population. Today we live in a world where control is no longer just military or physical. It is now digital, psychological, and spiritual. The beast no longer needs iron chains because it has created invisible chains that bind the soul. And one of the most effective tools it is using in this time is emerging technologies. Yes, technologies that seemed harmless, that promised to improve life, to make daily life easier, but which today have become instruments of marking, surveillance, and domination. Have you noticed how increasingly dependent we are on digital systems for everything? Buying, selling, working, studying, even worship. Social networks, for example, shape what you think, what you feel, what you consume. Algorithms know more about you than your own family. They know what you love, what you fear, what you desire. They profile you, classify you, surround you with content that validates your beliefs or destroys your faith. But it doesn't stop there. Advances such as artificial intelligence, AI, they are being sold as the new salvation of humanity, but they hide something far more dangerous. We are talking about machines that make soulless decisions, that define who has access to opportunities and who will be excluded. AI that can decide whether you will be approved for credit, whether you will have access to a benefit, whether you can travel, work, or become invisible to the system. And who do you think will be affected first? Who will be filtered, monitored, blocked, labeled? Historically, black people have always been the primary target of systemic mechanisms of oppression. From slavery to structural racism, we have experienced technologies of control specifically designed to silence us, hide us, erase us. Now, the same controlling spirit takes on a new form. It's the same system, just with new packaging. And while many are being seduced by these digital marvels, control is being installed slowly, silently, like a spiritual chip, programmed to keep us obedient, distracted, and above all, spiritually dead. Have you heard about the advances in universal biometrics? Fingerprints, facial recognition, iris scanning, all being collected in the name of security. But security for whom and against whom? The question is valid. There are already places in the world where you can no longer make bank transactions, buy food, or travel without being completely integrated into this digital identification system. And experts say that soon everything will be interconnected. A single global ID, a single login for your life, a code that will be your identity in the world, and those who don't have it will be outside the system. Do you see how this aligns with prophecy? Revelation 13 says that without the mark, no one will be able to buy or sell, and the world is being shaped to make this normal, acceptable, even desirable. People are already trading privacy for convenience, spirituality for connectivity, and that's frightening, because when that final mark is offered, many will already be conditioned to accept it without question. And for us, Black people, this conditioning is even more dangerous, because we have been the target of experiments, tests, exclusion, and surveillance for centuries. When new systems are implemented, we are the first to feel the side effects. Look at the peripheries. Look at the immigrants. Look at Africa. Where infrastructure is lacking, the system offers technological solutions. Where there is poverty, they offer apps. Where there is pain, they offer control disguised as help. But all of this comes at a price. Spiritual and material dependence on a system that does not recognize the true God. And this is how the beast advances. It offers ease but demands your soul. And many are already paying this price without realizing it. The implementation of centralized digital currencies by governments is another step in fulfilling the prophecy. When physical money disappears, everything will be traceable, monitorable, and cancelable. If you don't follow the system's rules, your account can be frozen, your resources blocked, your voice silenced. Today, social scoring mechanisms are already being tested, where your behavior and opinions define your access to rights. The beast is creating a world where obedience to the system is the new sanctity, and resistance is seen as rebellion. And Black people, once again, are being placed in the middle of this prophetic laboratory, because we have a strength that the system fears: our spiritual awareness, our ancestry, our connection to the eternal. That's why they try to entertain us, divide us, distract us. Because when Black people awaken, the structures crumble, and they know it. This is the time to open our eyes, not only spiritually, but also strategically. We cannot continue accepting everything that is handed to us in the name of modernity. We need to question, discern, and reject what contradicts our prophetic essence. Because the system of the beast doesn't just want our data, it wants our submission. It wants our silence. It wants us to forget who we are in God. We are facing a global engineering phenomenon that transforms bodies into products, minds into files, and souls into numbers. But God did not create us to be enrolled in a system that denies His existence. We were created to be free, conscious, connected to the Spirit, and not to binary codes. Perhaps you are now reflecting and feeling a mixture of fear and clarity. This is normal. It's a sign that your soul is reacting to the truth. And this is just the beginning of what we will explore further in this video. If you are clearly seeing all of this that is happening, write it here in the comments. The system is already operational if you recognize this reality in your life. Or, I don't want that brand. If your heart is already turning against this spiritual control. This comment could be the trigger to awaken other people who are trapped in this system without realizing it. And in the next moment, we'll delve even deeper, revealing how mass control is already underway and what you can do to avoid becoming another spiritual victim of this beast's machinery. By this point in the video, you may have realized that we are not just talking about physical, technological, or economic control. The most dangerous dimension of the beast's system is the one that operates in the invisible realm, in the field of emotions, the mind, and faith. It is in the spiritual domain that the true battle takes place, and that is precisely why so many are being defeated without even knowing they are at war. The beast's system has understood something that many still ignore. The most efficient way to control a people is to enslave their minds, and the quickest way to enslave the mind is to hijack their spirituality. We live in a generation saturated with content. The media dictates behaviors, entertainment shapes beliefs, politics establishes the limits of what is acceptable or not. And behind all this, there is a silent operation, disconnecting people from their original spiritual source. And who has been the main target of this disconnection? Black people. The people who carry an ancestral heritage of connection with the divine, with the sacred, with the spiritual mysteries that institutionalized religions have tried to erase. Because when a people forgets who they are in spirit, they become a mass to be manipulated, fertile ground for manipulation. And the media knows exactly how to do this. It doesn't need to tell you, don't believe in God directly. It simply occupies your time, your mind, your heart, with everything that distances you from His presence. Movies, series, music, soap operas, reality shows, all come loaded with subtle but consistent messages. Rejection of faith, trivialization of sin, worship of the body, normalization of violence, ridicule of spiritual values. Everything is entertainment, but behind it, it's spiritual engineering. An engineering thought out, planned, and financed to keep you too busy to pray, too distracted to fast, too tired to seek the truth. And then, when you least expect it, you become exactly what the system wants. Just another person living on autopilot. You work, consume, sleep, wake up, repeat. You never question, you never awaken. You live as if you were free, but you are trapped in a cycle of distraction, alienation, and control. Now tell me, when was the last time you felt your soul in profound silence, listening to the voice of the Spirit? When was the last time you disconnected from the noise of the world to immerse yourself in the waters of God's presence? If you don't remember, it's a warning sign. It's a sign that the system is working. And once again, this is not random. It's planned, because the enemy fears spiritual awakening. He fears seeing Black people recognizing their true identity, reconnecting with their origins, remembering that there is a divine purpose behind their history, their pain, their ancestry. They took our name, our language, our books, our land, but what they most desire to erase is our spiritual consciousness. Because while we are asleep, we are easy to manipulate, but when we awaken, we become dangerous. Dangerous to the system, dangerous to the lie, dangerous to the empire of the beast. And how does this spiritual control perpetuate itself? By using ideologies disguised as progress. The system sells a false freedom where everything is permitted, except the truth. They preach tolerance but persecute those who stand firm in biblical principles. They say that everything is relative, that there is no right and wrong, that each person should follow their own truth. But the Bible doesn't speak of my truth or your truth. The Bible speaks of truth with a capital T, and this truth is intolerable to the system of the beast, because it liberates. And where there is liberation, there is rupture. And where there is rupture, there is resistance. They told you that spirituality was something for cold churches, for dead doctrine. That's a lie. Spirituality is fire. It's depth. It's revelation. It's the voice of God within you. It's power that breaks chains, that raises nations, that transforms stories. But for that, you need to disconnect from the system that molds minds in series and reconnect with the Spirit that transforms from the inside out. And if you think all this is too radical, I ask you, who taught you to consider everything that brings you closer to God as radical? Who programmed your mind to be ashamed of prayer, to laugh at fasting, to think that the supernatural is something for fanatics? Think about it. The system of the beast doesn't present itself as evil. It disguises itself as light, as freedom, as tolerance. But all this hides a single mission: to steal your ability to think spiritually. And the most tragic thing is that this spiritual hijacking has been working. Look around you. How many young Black people no longer believe in anything? How many are immersed in entertainment, politics, or ideologies that distance them further and further from their spiritual essence? How many are wasting their vital energy in struggles that are valid, yes, but that have no root in the Word? The system wants you to fight, but against the wrong enemy. It wants you to question, but not the spiritual system hidden behind the structures. And here's a revelation that might disturb you. The enemy isn't afraid of empty activism. He's afraid of a people who pray, who fast, who seek discernment, who read the scriptures with spiritual eyes, who understand that the real struggle is invisible. He fears the awakening of the Black generation that understands it has been called to resist in the end times, to be a prophetic voice, to break free from the shackles of deception. That's why there's so much effort to erase African spiritual roots, to ridicule expressions of faith that don't fit the European mold, to portray the Bible as a book that doesn't belong to Black people. All of this is part of the great illusion. But when you begin to read the scriptures with the right eyes, everything changes. You see Black characters. You see peoples of Africa intertwined in covenants. You realize that our history doesn't begin with slavery, but with creation. And that awareness is liberating. The spiritual awakening that the enemy fears is the one that breaks with the narrative built around us. He fears it when we stop accepting the roles they've given us and begin to live out the purposes God has designed. And this awakening begins in secret. It begins when you close your eyes and say, I want to see with the eyes of the Spirit. I want to hear what the world isn't saying. I want to break free from hypnosis and live the truth. If you are feeling this now, it is because the Spirit is speaking to you. You are no longer just anyone. You are not a product of chance. You are a spiritual being with a prophetic calling. And the time has come to take your stand. If this part of the video spoke directly to you, write in the comments now, I am awakening. If you felt something inside you begin to stir, or I will not be a pawn, if you have decided to break free from this invisible control. You can't imagine how many people can be reached just by reading your comment, so share this phrase as an act of faith. And get ready, because in the next moment we're going to talk about the beast that acts in disguise, and what the system is really hiding behind its lamb-like appearance. If it has become clear that the system is operating, that there is a spiritual structure behind what the world calls progress, then now we need to confront one of the most delicate, yet most urgent questions of this generation. Who is the beast? Not in a mystical, symbolic, or vague way, but in a practical manner. What or who does this prophetic figure, described with such precision in Revelation 13, represent? And how has it manifested itself before our eyes, while most continue to live as if nothing is happening? The beast that John saw rising from the sea is described as a being with 7 heads and 10 horns, resembling a leopard with feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. This description, laden with symbolism, is not a random invention. It is a representation of a political spiritual system that dominates the world with force, cunning, and ferocity. The sea in Scripture frequently represents multitudes, nations, and peoples. That is, this beast arises from among the peoples, civilizations, and human empires. And it is not alone. It receives power directly from the dragon, Satan, and acts as his official agent on earth. But this beast is not merely an ethereal spiritual power. It manifests itself in visible systems, institutions that exist, operate, and influence all spheres of society. Governments, banks, corporations, religions, economic blocs, digital platforms. All of these can be expressions of the beast when they stray from God's principles and align themselves with the dragon's plan. The beast is not a single man. It is an empire in disguise. It is a coordinated system designed to lead people to worship not God, but human power itself, technology, money, and control. The second beast, on the other hand, is even more subtle. It comes from the earth, which symbolically indicates that it arises from a more stable, seemingly safe, reliable place. It has 2 horns like a lamb, but speaks like a dragon. That is, its appearance is meek, religious, spiritual, but its words are deceitful, demonic. It is false religion. It is the corrupt spiritual system that allies itself with politics to promote the worship of the first beast. It is the one that creates the image of the beast. It is the one that deceives with signs, that performs false miracles, that seduces the spiritually unprepared masses. And now, look around. See the leaders who claim to represent God, but who live by alliances with political and economic power. See the speeches that promote a spirituality without a cross, without renunciation, without truth. See the churches that have become stages for entertainment, but have lost their prophetic authority. Notice how faith has become a product, how the sacred has become commerce, how the gospel has become a marketing strategy. All this is the work of the second beast, and when we connect this to the history of Africa and the black diaspora, the picture becomes even more profound. Because if there is one people who have been oppressed by both of these systems, political and religious, it is the African people. The beast of the sea, with its imperialist dominion, colonized, enslaved, plundered riches and bodies. The beast of the land, with its religious face, imposed doctrines, distorted the scriptures, and erased the original spirituality of the African peoples. It was these beasts who told us that our God was not the true one, that our way of praying was primitive, that our skin was cursed, that our soul needed to be saved by them. Spiritual domination over Africa did not begin with weapons, but with words, with manipulated Bibles, with racist theologies, with missions that resembled invasions. It was the false prophet who convinced millions that the only way to approach God was by accepting the European model of spirituality, a model that excluded, silenced, and whitened. And this model, even today, remains alive in many churches, in many pulpits, in many minds. It is the beast speaking like a lamb, but acting like a dragon. Therefore, we can no longer ignore that the prophecy is being fulfilled with precision in the trajectory of Black people. We were not only oppressed politically, but also spiritually. We were torn from our land, but also from our spiritual identity. And the beast continues to act, today in a more digital, more subtle, but equally lethal way. It no longer needs the visible chains of slavery. Today it acts through false doctrines, ideologies that seem just, systems that promise freedom but deliver spiritual slavery. The image of the beast is being erected, a unified global system where culture, politics, and religion become one voice, a voice that does not tolerate dissent, that persecutes those who denounce it, that excludes those who do not love the system. And whoever refuses to bow down before this image, just as the 3 Hebrew youths did before Nebuchadnezzar's statue, will be thrown into the furnace. You will be canceled, persecuted, silenced. But there is a generation that will not bow down. A generation of conscious, awakened, prophetic Black men and women. A generation that understands that the beast is not just a biblical prophecy, it is a social, political, and spiritual reality. A generation that is not afraid to say, "We know who you are. We know what they are doing. We know how they try to silence us, but we will not be silenced, because the truth has already been planted in our spirit, and it can no longer be uprooted." Perhaps now you are feeling a different kind of weight, as if a curtain has been lifted from your eyes. And that is exactly what this word came to do, to awaken you, to make you realize that the enemy is acting with all he has, but that the Spirit of God is blowing on those who still have ears to hear. If you've made it this far and this part of the video made you think, leave a comment below. I recognize the beast, if you understand how it has manifested itself in society. Or write, "I will not bow down," if you feel you are being called to resist this system. These phrases are more than just comments. They are spiritual declarations. They are the marks of a people who will not sell out, will not bend, will not be silenced. And in the next moment, we will delve even deeper to understand the true meaning of the mark of the beast and what is already being placed on the hands and foreheads of those who do not perceive the spiritual danger they are in. If we have so far clearly explained how the beast's system is operating in the political, economic, and spiritual spheres, it is impossible not to turn now to one of the most feared and most misunderstood issues of all prophecy, the mark of the beast. Some say it will be a chip. Others talk about a tattoo, a code, a physical inscription. But the truth is that many are looking too much outside, waiting for a visible sign, and they don't realize that this mark can be much more subtle, much deeper, and that it may already be accepted, even within the church, in communities, in homes, in daily choices, without anyone noticing. The Bible is clear in saying that this mark will be placed on the right hand or on the forehead, and that without it, no one will be able to neither buying nor selling. But the biblical text, full of divine wisdom, presents this not merely as a physical sign, but as a spiritual choice. The hand represents action, the forehead thought. This means that the brand is related to the way you act and the way you think. It's not just a matter of technology or visibility, it's a matter of identity, loyalty, and alliance. And here comes an urgent reflection. Is it possible that the Black population, which has been historically deceived, manipulated, and used as a tool for manipulation, isn't he also being led to accept this brand without realizing it? Haven't we been conditioned to think according to the system, to act according to the logic of the beast, to desire the things the empire imposes, to behave as they expect us to behave? And what if we are carrying this mark, not in our bodies, but in our minds and attitudes? See how the system shapes thinking. It teaches that success is individual, that it's every man for himself, that those who don't achieve are weak. That's the doctrine of the beast. It teaches that you can do anything, that there is no right or wrong, that everything is relative. Doctrine of the beast. It teaches that spirituality is weakness, that faith is backwardness, that ancestral tradition is ignorance. Doctrine of the beast. It teaches that God is distant, that he doesn't care about color, that we are all equal, while it continues killing black people in the favelas, on the streets, in prisons. The discourse is beautiful, but the reality is demonic. Now think about this. How many times have you stayed silent to fit in? How many times have you acted against your principles to avoid being canceled? How many times have you gone with the flow just to avoid conflict? These small concessions build, brick by brick, the acceptance of the brand. Because it won't happen all at once. It will come as a habit, as an adaptation, as a behavior. Meanwhile, black people continue to be trained for silence. We continue to be conditioned to obey, to consume, to not question. Soap operas, movies, leaders, everything contributes to keeping black people oblivious to what is really happening. And once again, as in the past, we are led en masse, no longer on ships, but within ideological systems, to accept the condition that has been imposed upon us. But God is raising up a generation with discernment, because discernment is the only thing that can save us from this collective deception. It's not enough to know the prophecy. It is necessary to have spiritual discernment. It's not enough to know what is written. It is necessary to have insight into what lies behind the words, because the brand won't come as something obvious. It will come as something good, as something necessary, as something urgent to maintain order. And once again, black people will be faced with a choice: to submit to the system and continue surviving as always, or to take a stand and risk losing privileges, opportunities, and security. That is the mark. It separates those who live by the Spirit from those who live by convenience, and those who lack spiritual firmness, those who are not anchored in the Word, those who have not been freed from the slave mentality. He will accept, smiling, whatever the system offers. The beast knows that black people possess a spiritual power that, if awakened, represents a threat to the plan of darkness. That's why the brand is offered to us with benefits: access, inclusion, credit, visibility, representation, all controlled by them. They say, you can have a voice, you can occupy spaces, you can rise, as long as you play our game, with our rules, with our brand. And do you know what the risk is? It's that many are accepting it. Many are already marked. Not because they received a visible mark, but because they already are. They think like the system thinks. Already they act as the system wants. Already they love what the system offers. And when the literal mark is imposed, they will offer no resistance. Because the domestication process was completed long ago. And that's why we need to wake up now. Discernment begins when you decide to look beyond the surface, when you start comparing everything with Scripture. When you ask yourself, does this glorify God or does it glorify man? When you listen to a speech and filter it through the truth of the Word. When you observe the movement of the world and ask, where is God in all this? Because, my brother, the brand will not be mandatory for those who already wear it by choice. It will only be imposed on those who still resist. And the beast wants black people not to resist. It wants them to obey, to smile, to say, Amen, even when their hearts scream no. But there is a remnant. There are those who do not conform. There are those who have understood that the Bible is not just a religious book, but a war map, a manual of resistance, a denunciation against empires, against systems, against the kingdoms of darkness. And these will not accept the mark, because they have already been marked by God. They already have the seal of the Spirit. They have already understood that faithfulness is worth more than comfort. That truth is costly, but lies demand the soul. If you're listening to this now and feel that, in some way, you've already been conforming to the system, this is your chance to break free. It doesn't matter how far you've strayed. It doesn't matter how much you've given in. God is calling you back. He is saying, I can still use you. I can still set you free. I can still mark you with my glory. But to do that, you need to choose. Choose whom you want to serve, the beast or the lamb. And make no mistake, neutrality is also a choice. Silence is also a mark. Omission is also an alliance. Either you take a stand today, or you will be swallowed by the system tomorrow. That's what the apocalypse shows us. That's what the Spirit is revealing to this generation. And that's what black people need to understand before it's too late. If this moment in the video is affecting you, if something is awakening inside you, write it here in the comments. I reject the brand. If you understand that this war is real and that you need to take a stand, or I want the seal of the Spirit, if you feel you need to return to the source, reconnect with God, and be marked by Him. These phrases are not just words. They are prophetic seeds. They are signs in the spiritual world. And perhaps by reading your comment, someone who was asleep will also awaken. And in the next part of this video, we will reveal what is the true role of Black people within this prophetic scenario, and why does the beast fear our existence so much? After understanding what the brand represents, who the beast is, and how the system works to erase consciences, it remains to reveal a part that few have the courage to expose: the true role of Black people within the prophetic scenario. Because while many have been taught to view Revelation as a book of terror, as a distant threat, the Spirit wants to show us that this book is, in fact, it is called a restoration and repositioning for a specific people who have been scattered, silenced, and forgotten: the Black people. For centuries, biblical characters of African origin were erased or bleached in translations, in images, in pulpits, in theological schools. But the Scriptures, when read with discernment and spiritual eyes, reveal a powerful truth. African people have been present in biblical narratives from the very beginning. When the Bible speaks of Cush, Mizraim, Ethiopia, Sheba, and Egypt, it is referring to Black nations with their own structure, culture, spirituality, and direct presence in God's plans. Who was the Queen of Sheba, who defied kings with her wisdom and went to Solomon bringing treasures and revelations? Who was the Ethiopian eunuch, a man of position in the government of Candace, Queen of Ethiopia, who was baptized by Philip and became one of the first to bring the gospel to the African continent? Who supported the Messiah as a child, sheltering the Holy Family in Egypt, an African territory, during Herod's persecution? And more. Who helped Jesus carry the cross to Calvary when everyone else had fled? Simon of Cyrene, a dark-skinned man from Libya, an African territory. These are not random details. They are spiritual signs. They are marks that show that there is a direct connection between African peoples and God's revelation in history. But why was this hidden for so long? Because there is a spiritual fear of the restoration of identity. The system doesn't just fear the bodies of Black people. It fears the spirit of the Black people. And what was done to imprison this spiritual force? They erased our names, distorted our origins, replaced our history with a narrative constructed to keep us enslaved, first physically, then mentally, and now spiritually. But this lie is crumbling, because the Spirit is breathing again on the dry bones. It is awakening a generation that no longer accepts the fabricated image of a European Jesus, nor the theology of submission that has been imposed upon us. We are looking at the Scriptures with clean eyes and realizing that the spiritual heritage of African peoples is not inferior. It has been sabotaged. The African continent, even before colonization, was a territory brimming with spirituality. There were prophets, priests, kings, warriors, and sages who maintained a direct connection with the eternal. But with the arrival of the beasts, the colonizing politics and corrupted religion, all of this was labeled pagan, evil, primitive. And so, the enemy's greatest strategy has been executed, making the people forget who they are. A people without identity is a people without direction, and a people without direction follows any system that convinces them they are on the right path. But what if the African diaspora, scattered across the four corners of the earth, is in fact the fulfillment of a prophecy that many refuse to see? What if the true spiritual Israel, the one that maintains a covenant with the Most High, is formed not only by bloodline, but by a spiritual lineage marked by suffering, resilience, and faith? Many scholars and alternative theologians have been studying the hypothesis for years that the African diaspora is a reflection of the people prophesied in Deuteronomy 28, the one who would be taken to other nations on ships, who would lose his identity, his language, his freedom, but who would be called back again in the end times. If this is true, and the signs suggest it is, then Black people are not just victims of history. It is an active part of God's plan of redemption for humanity. We are part of the prophetic nation that carries within it the memory of Eden, of the covenant, of the ancient faith. And that is why they oppress us so much. Because when this people awakens, when this generation awakens, the whole system is shaking. The enemy knows that The spiritual heritage of African peoples is too profound to be destroyed. It can only be kept dormant. And that's what he's been doing. Setting our young people on a path to fame, money, looks, vanity, status. And at the same time, distancing them from the scriptures, from prayer, from fasting, from holiness. But now the cycle is being broken. The wind of the Spirit is moving. And those with spiritual ears are already hearing the sound of the call. Return to me, my people. Recognize who you are. Awaken from the hypnosis. Come out of Babylon. Reject the system. Be the voice crying in the wilderness. That's why you're here watching this video. It's not an algorithm. It's not luck. It is a prophetic calling. Perhaps you have spent your whole life trying to fit into a system that was never made for you. Perhaps you have tried to conform to a theology that does not respect your ancestry, that does not acknowledge your history, that does not embrace your skin color. But now the Spirit is saying, you are not leftovers. You are the root. You are not a flaw. You are the foundation. You are not a servant of the system. You are a child of the Most High. This recognition is more than cultural identity. It's spiritual identity. And it's only when we understand this that we can resist the mark, the beast, the great illusion. Because whoever knows who you are in God, it does not bow down before the world. And whoever bears the mark of the alliance, do not compromise your faith for any temporary benefit. If this part of the video is opening your eyes, if you feel that there is a truth that has always been inside you and is now being activated, leave a comment here to mark this spiritual moment. Write, I am part of the prophecy, if you understand that your existence carries a calling. Or, I awaken to my identity, if you are returning to your spiritual roots now. These words are not just for me. They are for the heavens, for the spiritual world, for others who will read them and feel that they are not alone. And in the next part, we will talk about something even more powerful, the call to resist until the end, and how to stay strong even when the system tightens its grip. Now that we've begun to understand the depth of the calling of Black people in the prophecies, it's impossible to move on without discussing the most ignored, but also the most dangerous dimension of the end times, the invisible spiritual war. And the reason it's so lethal is precisely because it cannot be seen with the naked eye. While many are waiting for visible wars, tanks in the streets, and anti-Christian laws declared, the real battlefield is happening now. Within minds, feelings, emotions, atmospheres, environments, and especially in the spirit. The enemy operating behind the beast system is extremely strategic. It doesn't attack the body directly first. It goes to the soul, the mind, and the spirit. He attacks through attrition. He uses repetition. He operates through doubt, guilt, fear, anxiety, and confusion. He generates spiritual fatigue. He makes it seem like prayer is useless, that seeking God's presence is ineffective, that spiritual resistance is madness. And when a person begins to believe this, she lets her guard down and becomes vulnerable. And here's the hard truth. Black people have been one of the main targets of these invisible attacks. Because if there is a community that carries within itself a dormant, yet powerful spiritual force, that community is ours. And the enemy knows it. He fears it. He anticipates it. And that is why the emotional and spiritual attacks are launched in a coordinated, silent way, and with the appearance of normal life. But it is not normal to wake up without hope. It is not normal to live with a wounded soul. It is not normal to ignore faith because the pain has become greater than the conviction. This is spiritual warfare. Do you know that feeling of oppression you have, and you don't know where it comes from? That sudden sadness, that weight that prevents you from praying, that cycle of negative thoughts that seems endless, that feeling of spiritual exhaustion, as if something is draining your energy and pushing you away from God's presence? That's it. This isn't just psychological. This is a real battle in the invisible realm. And if you look around, you'll realize how this type of war has been fought with even greater intensity in Black communities. Why are suicide rates among young Black people increasing? Why are so many sinking into addiction, depression, self-sabotage, anxiety, and emotional illness? Why is there so much abandonment of faith, so much spiritual coldness, so much distraction, so much silence? It's not a coincidence. It's an attack. The enemy knows that it is not possible to destroy a people who know their origin, their mission, and their spiritual authority. Therefore, he no longer tries to defeat us with visible chains. He makes us prisoners from within. He weakens our ability to discern. He slowly severs our connection with the eternal. He invades our homes through music, the internet, television, and speeches that distance us from the Word. And when he perceives that we are vulnerable, he plants seeds: fear, anger, discouragement, confusion, empty religiosity. And that's why the spiritual protection has become urgent, more urgent than ever before. We can no longer live a superficial life. We can't be a Sunday believer or spiritual only when everything is going well, because the enemy doesn't take a break. He operates 24 hours a day, and if we aren't shielded, he will enter through the cracks. Shielding yourself spiritually isn't just about going to church. It's to have a life of true constant prayer, fasting, consecration, and separation. It's understanding that this world is not our permanent home. It's keeping your mind protected by the truth of the Word. It's resisting the toxic thoughts that tell you that you have no value, that you have no purpose, that you are alone, because you're not. God hasn't taken his eyes off you. God knows your story, your pain, your journey. But he also knows that if you're not intentional, the system will swallow you up. And that's why you need protection. You need to be spiritually covered. You need to learn to discern attacks before they arrive. And do you know what one of the enemy's greatest strategies is in this invisible war? To convince you that this war doesn't exist, to make it seem like everything is a coincidence, that everything is an emotional problem, that everything is of the flesh. But the Apostle Paul already warned us. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood. It is against principalities, powers, rulers of this dark world, and spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And these forces are organized, intelligent, persistent. They study generations, examine vulnerabilities, identify patterns, and work with surgical precision. And to repeat, Black communities have been direct targets of these operations, because there is still a hidden, dormant power in our families, in our roots, in our worship, in our resistance. And the plan is simple: weaken it before it fully awakens. But now the turning point has arrived. Now is the time for awakening. Now is the season where God's children need to position themselves as spiritual warriors, not with carnal weapons, but with invisible armor, with the helmet of salvation, with the sword of the Spirit, with the shield of faith, with feet firmly planted in truth, with discernment, with authority, with vigilance. The time has come to learn how to perceive spiritual environments, to sense when something is wrong, to interrupt negative spiritual cycles that have been repeating themselves in your life and in the lives of your family, to realize that certain attacks are not natural, they are spiritual, that the coincidence that distanced you from faith was, in fact, a planned attack, that the sudden crisis was an attempt to disconnect you from your purpose, and all of this can only be overcome with protection, with vigilance, with intercession, with resistance, because the chosen ones are not those who have never been attacked. They are those who have learned to remain standing even when the world is collapsing around you. These are the ones who cover themselves every day, who make their home an altar, who transform their steps into war, who pray even when they have no strength, who get up even when they fall. If you feel that this part of the video spoke directly to your soul, I want to invite you to leave a comment here, as an act of resistance and spiritual stance. Right, I am at war, but I am standing. If you are feeling this struggle within yourself. Or right, I shield myself in the Spirit, if you are determined to no longer live unprotected in this invisible war. These comments are like arrows launched into the spiritual world. They are declarations that you will no longer be a silent victim of the invisible war. And in the next moment, we'll understand how this resilience needs to be maintained until the end, even when everything seems to be falling apart. If you have stayed this far, if you have felt your soul burn with each revelation, if something within you is being reactivated, then it is because you are beginning to perceive the first signs of what we call collective awakening. A silent yet powerful movement is sweeping across nations, breaking invisible chains, reviving identities, and calling Black people back to their spiritual origins. And this awakening is not happening within conventional structures. It is happening in the streets, in homes, in spiritual deserts, in places where institutions no longer reach. It is a call from on high, a divine breath that is sweeping through the hearts of those who have been asleep for generations. We are experiencing a spiritual resistance that doesn't make headlines, but resonates powerfully in the spiritual world. It is their resistance from those who say no to the system, even when it means losing acceptance, status, visibility. It is the resistance of those who courageously return to their spiritual roots, immersing themselves in a faith that was not inherited solely from the colonizers, but that pulsates in the blood of ancestors who walked with the eternal long before slavery. This return to the roots is not simple nostalgia. It's not an attempt to reconstruct the past. It's a prophetic movement that understands that the future can only be fully lived when one knows their origin, and the enemy knows this. Therefore, his strategy has always been to disconnect us from our origins. They made us believe we came from slavery, when in fact, we came from royalty. They made us think our spirituality was witchcraft, when in fact it was ancient wisdom connected to the true God. They erased our prophets, hid our leaders, and distorted our symbols. And yes, there have been many black prophets who have been silenced throughout history, men and women who carried a living revelation of the Spirit, but who were silenced by corrupt religious systems, by racist churches, by institutions that could not accept that a prophetic voice could come from a black body. Many were ignored, labeled as rebels, deviants, heretics. But their words continue to echo. Their prayers still sustain territories. Their tears still water the spiritual deserts of our generation. They were seeds, and we are the fruits. This collective awakening is not linked to a famous name, a charismatic leader, or an influential church. It is happening in invisible, deep within, in secret. People are returning to silent prayer. They are questioning what they previously accepted without thinking. They are dreaming of things they don't understand, but which push them back into His presence. They are feeling discomfort with superficial preaching. They are having visions, premonitions, revelations. They are being set apart, and this is not madness. This is God breathing the beginning of awakening. And perhaps at this very moment, you are wondering, how do I know if I'm experiencing this awakening? The answer lies in the small signs. You start to lose interest in empty conversations. You begin to feel hungry for something you can't explain. The music that once cheered you up now bothers you. The routine that once satisfied you now suffocates you. The religion that once was enough for you now seems dry. And above all, you begin to realize that there's something inside you that hasn't yet been activated, and that needs to come out. This is the beginning of your personal spiritual revolution, a calling from within, a tug from heaven. And this is happening to thousands at the same time. Young people, adults, elders, black men and women who, even without fully understanding, are beginning to say, there's something wrong with this religious system. Something is missing from my faith. I need to find God for real, not just in the words of others, but in my own journey. And when these people awaken, the system collapses, because the system has always thrived on the sleep of the masses. It feeds on our ignorance, our complacency, our emotional dependence. But an awakened people think, question, confront, break, rebuild, and that is dangerous for the beast, because there is no system in the world that can control a free soul. You don't need human approval to experience this awakening. You only need spiritual willingness, courage to say enough, boldness to return to the Word with new eyes, faith to pray like you've never prayed before, strength to separate yourself from what is keeping you asleep, because awakening doesn't come with shouts, it comes with a breath. But when you realize it, she can no longer fall asleep again. And in this collective awakening, each person has a role. Some will teach, others will intercede, some will denounce, others will heal, but all will bear the same mark: the presence of the Spirit, the truth of the Word, and steadfastness of purpose. It doesn't matter if the world rejects you. It doesn't matter if they call you radical, strange, or fanatical. The truth is, those who are awakened have always seemed crazy to those who are still asleep. But it is through them that God moves history. And if you've made it this far in the video, it's because you are part of this movement. This is not entertainment. It's a summons. This is not content. It's a call to action. And now you need to make a decision. Will you go back to sleep, or will you take your place in this invisible army that is rising up everywhere? If this moment spoke to you, write it in the comments right now with faith and intention. I am part of the awakening if you understand that you are being called to break with the system. Or I woke up and I'm not going back to sleep. If you feel that something within you has been activated and will never be silenced again. These words have spiritual weight. They are declarations that break chains, that activate others around them, that signal that the army is forming. And in the next part of the video, we will understand how, even amidst all this resistance, the faithful remnant will be sustained, and how God will preserve those who do not bow down. If you've been following along this far, you're probably feeling the weight of the spiritual responsibility being placed before us. With each revelation, a silent question begins to echo within our spirit. So how can I prepare myself to resist all of this? How can I strengthen myself spiritually so as not to be deceived, seduced, marked, or overcome by the beast's system? And this question is the beginning of a journey that goes far beyond theory. It demands action, dedication, vigilance, holiness, awareness, and above all, true communion with the Spirit of the Eternal. The first step in this spiritual preparation is to understand that you cannot rely on your own strength. The system operating in recent times is subtle, seductive, and intelligent. It presents itself with an appearance of goodness, justice, inclusion, and peace. But behind the rhetoric, there are spirits at work, and therefore, only those clothed in discernment and spiritual sensitivity will be able to resist. It is not enough to have theoretical biblical knowledge. It is not enough to have an opinion on eschatology. It is not enough to be a traditional believer. It will be necessary to have eyes open and spirit aligned with heaven. And this requires daily, intentional, consistent spiritual practices. Yes, fasting is necessary, not out of tradition, but out of alignment. Fasting separates us from the noise of the world and reconnects us with the voice of God. In noisy times, fasting is spiritual silence. Prayer is also necessary, but not that hurried, shallow prayer. I'm talking about a prayer that tears open the heavens, breaks chains, invades spiritual territories, moves the heavens, and paralyzes the actions of hell. This prayer is born from the Spirit, not from emotion. Furthermore, it is urgent to return to the Word. The Bible needs to stop being a symbolic book and become our word again. War manual. Every verse is a weapon. Every prophecy is a key. Every psalm is a shield. And above all, every teaching of Christ is a map of resistance. The system will try to twist the scriptures, as it has already been doing. It will present convenient doctrines, motivational sermons, and diluted interpretations. Only those who know the truth deeply will be able to identify the false prophets, the corrupt leaders, and the well-packaged deceptions. But this preparation is not only spiritual, it is also emotional and physical. The body is the temple of the Spirit, and many have fallen because they are emotionally weak, their feelings are unwell, and their identity is vulnerable. The enemy knows that if he can't touch your spirit, he will try to enter through your soul. That's why it's necessary to seek emotional healing, resolve traumas, cut toxic alliances, free yourself from mental prisons. It's necessary to know yourself, treat yourself with dignity, understand your cycles, your weaknesses, and your strengths. Preparing yourself spiritually is also to heal completely. And we cannot forget the importance of surveillance. Spiritual vigilance is not paranoia nor constant fear. It is a state of attentiveness. Jesus repeatedly warned us, watch and pray. The problem is that many pray without watching, and others watch but without prayer. Vigilance is the practice of observing the spiritual movements around you. It is being sensitive to what God is saying. It is noticing when something in the environment changes. It is discerning people, words, intentions. It is knowing when something seemingly good carries a disguised poison. The beast won't appear with horns. It will arrive with charisma. Vigilance also involves being mindful of what enters through your eyes and ears. The system uses images, words, music, films, and algorithms to condition the mind. You may be being shaped without realizing it. Therefore, close the gaps. Don't watch everything. Don't listen to just anything. Don't feed yourself content that spiritually numbs you. Prepare yourself purposefully. Surround yourself with content that builds you up, that makes you grow, that connects you with heaven and not with the abyss. And perhaps most importantly, live an active faith. The faith that overcomes the world is not passive faith, which only believes in easy times. It is the faith that endures when everything collapses. It is the faith that shouts, "I believe," even when reality screams, "There is no way out." Active faith translates into actions, into generosity, into firmness, into courage to break with sin, into boldness to confront unjust systems, into love for those who are still imprisoned. This faith cannot be tamed, and it is with it that you will win. You might be wondering, but how do I know if I'm actually preparing in the right way? The answer lies in the results. You begin to realize that your thoughts are changing, that your desires are being purified, that distractions no longer have the same power over you, that the people around you are beginning to notice something different in your presence, that your life is becoming lighter, even amidst the struggle, that your voice carries authority, that your prayer is answered, that your path has direction. This is a sign that the Spirit is shaping you to resist, and this preparation is not a solitary one. Although the system wants to isolate us, God is raising us up, remaining in every corner. People who are also waking up, who are also praying in the early morning, who are also fasting in secret, who are also saying no to sin, who are also disconnecting from the system to reconnect with heaven. These people form the invisible army of resistance, and you are part of it. If you feel you are in a process of preparation, that you are no longer the same, that you are being called to leave your spiritual comfort zone, then state that here in the comments. Or write, "I am in spiritual preparation," if you understand that this call is for now. Or say, "My faith is active," if you have decided to live in a firm, vigilant, and purposeful way. These statements activate others. They create an atmosphere. They announce that the enemy, he will not have the last word on this generation. And in the next part of the video, we're going to delve into how to recognize the prophetic times we're living in and why there's no longer room for neutrality. If you've stayed with me this far, that says a lot about you. It says that your spirit is awakening. It says that you are no longer part of the crowd. You are a remnant, and the remnant doesn't watch out of curiosity. The remnant watches out of a mission. So, if this message resonated with you on any level, this proves that you are ready to take the next step. Click the button now, sign up, and activate the bell. This isn't about numbers. It's about spiritual connection with those who understand the times we are living in. And do the following. Comment below now the phrase, "I am a remnant until the end." This will be our spiritual code in the comments. Whoever reads it will know that you not only watched everything, but that you are committed to the calling. And if you've made it to the end, you already know. Leave a like. It's the least we can do to push this message to more lives that need waking up. It doesn't stop here. The next video that's appearing on the screen it will take you even deeper into this awakening. Click on it now, and let's go all the way together.